Hi, welcome to another episode of My Autoimmune Path. My name is Jen, and today we have a treat. We have an interview, and I want to introduce my friend Stephanie. And Stephanie is a health coach, and I'm super excited about having her today. So, Stephanie, why don't you start with just telling a little bit about yourself and maybe kind of how you initially got into sort of the health journey or weight loss, or kind of whatever that big moment was in your life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to do this and to be on with you.
Yeah.
My experience is probably like a lot of women my age, hit the big 50 recently. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, watching my mom. Seemed like she was always on some kind of little diet and doing step aerobics and things like that. But I never was one who really struggled with my weight or anything. I was a dancer, but I was not athletic. I did not own a pair of tennis shoes until college, I think.
Wow.
But my mother did, in general, feed us pretty healthy and did have, we had one sweet a day, kind of things like that. But it wasn't until actually after I got married and, I went from having my mother's kind of controlling my health to college. And I went to a school that had no other food options other than the dining hall, to being on my own and a little bit of a free-for-all into, eating what I wanted to. But still, it wasn't really too much of a problem until after I had kids and I hit 40. And all of a sudden, I got to the point where I was embarrassed about my appearance. I had a lot of guilt and shame about the way that I had gotten or the way I was looking. I would go to the grocery store to get groceries and I would buy a candy bar and shove it in my mouth when I got in the car real quick, because the faster I eat it, the less time there was, guilt. And hide the wrapper in my pocketbook, And then I got to the point 7 years ago, next week. This is like my 7th anniversary here. And I went into the bathroom to change clothes because I was too embarrassed to change clothes in front of my husband. And at that point, I realized that something needed to change. And I didn't want to diet. I never liked to diet. I didn't want to exercise. I didn't like to exercise, but I knew that I did not want to continue on in this journey. And so I saw a friend talking about a program that she had joined and was coaching. And I joined it. And I will say my husband and I both were kind of like, yeah, this is not going to work. I'm probably going to quit. And within a few weeks, we were both like, what has happened? It was one of those things that I was ready for. And having someone really tell me and instruct me and show me that I don't need to diet. I just need to eat good, healthy, whole food. But the kicker was every Saturday we were told to have a treat. Mm-hmm. And being given permission to enjoy less healthy foods, to stop calling foods good or bad and call myself good or bad based on what I had eaten.
Right.
That really kind of flipped the switch for me. It wasn't this restriction. It was, no, you want to live life to the fullest, but also to the healthiest. And it's not about as much about not being able to eat. It's tailoring your food to eat well and giving the freedom to enjoy those less healthy foods in a good balance. Finding out that wasn't that I hated exercises, I hated cardio. I love strength training. And I started lifting, just my little 5-pound pink dumbbells that I had. And that was transforming to me. And so then I spread the word to all my friends and my family. It transformed my marriage. It transformed my relationship with my mother. She began to also go down this health journey, and my best friends. And I realized that I wanted to help people like me, people who wanted to be healthy, but saw it as a restrictive thing and a
Right.
quick thing.
Mm.
I went into this wanting to lose 10 pounds, like
Sure.
so many people do. And pretty soon I realized that's not really what it was about. It was really about, I want to be a 60, 65, 70,
Mm.
75-year-old woman who is active and is not, you know, sitting around and not constrained to doctor's offices and appointments. And I want to be able to move and to be healthy for my life. And so that is really why. And then I decided I need to spread the word, and I need to
Yeah.
help other people like me realize that they can do this too. And it can become a normal lifestyle, not just a program that you go through or a thing that you follow, but it can be
Right.
something for life.
Cool. That's great. So how many years was it after you kind of started on that journey before then you transitioned into being a coach?
I think it was about 2 years,
Okay.
2.5 years. I homeschooled my boys, graduating my second one in a month. And I knew that I was going to be having some extra time. And I'm a former teacher, eighth grade math teacher, but I did not want to go back to teaching. And I wanted to have the flexibility. My husband's job is abnormal. And I wanted to have the flexibility to be able to spend time with him when he was home, to travel with him if possible. And also to have a real impact, not just on one person's life, but to be able to impact entire families. Because the way mom goes, the rest of the family tends to go.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
true.
now, I have women who have young children and they're raising daughters who are watching their moms get strong and they're watching their moms eat healthy. And I love to think about, we're raising a generation of girls that's not going to think about skinny, but they're going to see food as healthy and
Right.
food as good.
Right.
They're not going to see their moms dieting. They're going to see their moms enjoying good, healthy food and enjoying exercise. And so to be able to influence the next generations through that.
Yeah. Great. Well, you mentioned some young moms that you work with, but one question I had was, do you have kind of a typical age range, or is it kind of a wide spectrum? Or
Most of my clients are in their 40s, I would say, and up. I have a few in their 60s, but most of my ladies are in their 40s and 50s. And but I do have a few that are in their late 30s, and raising younger children. So a lot of women, I feel like, once they get into that, they're done having babies and their kids are getting older and they're basically perimenopause hits all of
right.
us, even in the little ways, starting about 35 and on. And so that tends to be, what am I thinking phrase there? That tends to be kind of the age range that most of my clients are in that 40 to 45 and up general age.
Gotcha. Yeah. I know. I started menopause very early. It was, I think, 36. So,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
And it can have a wide range of effects, but I think so many women, I'm so glad we're talking about it now, because I know,
Yes.
when I was growing up and my mom said, they just didn't talk about it. And you just kind of thought, oh, menopause is just one of those things. And then realizing, no, it is a much wider, a much broader path than just one day or one
Right.
year.
Or something to just have to suffer through. There's
Right.
so many
Yes.
things that we can do to
Absolutely.
help,
Absolutely.
which might lead into a good question of kind of, what do you help with as far as that, or do y'all kind of look at that aspect in the coaching?
Yes, one of the things that the more women I work with, the more I realize that everyone is different. And that's one of the things when you try to just apply a generic formula or a generic program, it might not hit you well. And so really recognizing that, so much has to do with genetics, so much has to do with our prior lifestyle, where how we come into our 35 and our 40 and 45. And to being able to say, okay, you're going through some pretty severe symptoms. This is not a time for us to stress your body. And that is one of the things that you realize, for women, especially our age, is that stress affects everything. And when you are having stress in your life, when you're having stress in job, you're having stress in your body, when your hormones are going crazy, estrogen's dropping, progesterone's dropping, you have a stressful situation literally inside your body. And that is not the time that you necessarily need to be doing these extreme things. That is going to backfire. One of the things that a lot of women do not know, and I did not know, is that when you undereat, you stress your body and you cause your body to actually store fat. Your
Yes.
metabolism slows and goes into survival mode.
Yes.
And so you're trying to lose weight, you're stressing your body out more, and you're actually causing yourself to put on excess weight.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the further you get into menopause and closer to menopause, the harder it is to lose that fat because
Right.
of the fluctuating hormones.
Yes.
And so really being able to take into account what's going on with you. Are you having hot flashes? Are you dealing with night sweats? Are you dealing with this excess stress in your body? We need to remove that as much as we can food wise, which means we need to fuel your body. And so for most women, when I give them their, I do custom macros. We look at their life, we look at their eating styles, all that stuff, and we create what's this ideal. And of course, number one is protein, because when we are entering into this stage, as estrogen declines, you actually process protein less than you did 20 years ago. So you could eat 100 grams of protein and your body might only get like 50 or 60 of that. And so we actually have to increase that. And so by increasing our protein, by looking at our carbs and our fats and getting those healthy whole food carbs and fats, most of my clients are like, Stephanie, this is too much food. I can't eat this much food. I'm like, just watch. When you give your body more nutrition, you're actually removing some of the stress from it and it will respond. So that is definitely one thing, that aspect of fueling over restricting is so important during perimenopause and menopause. Muscle building, number one. In fact, we pull back on the cardio. Cardio is great for your heart and all, but moving that into walking and brisk walking and taking our time, the limited time that we have, and putting that into muscle building is what is going to help. When the more muscle you have, the better blood sugar you have, the better your hormones are able to function, the better your thyroid is able to function. It is truly the fountain of youth and is one of the things that focusing on that is supporting your whole entire body. So those are a couple of the things that we really focus on. And also for most of my clients, pulling back on the dairy and gluten during the stage, which is, I know for you with autoimmune diseases, something that so many women like, oh, I don't have celiac. I don't have a lactose intolerance. And I always say, let's just see. And it's not a restriction. It's not a cutting it completely out.
Right.
I want to eat my donut.
Right.
But pulling back.
Yeah.
And saying, let's replace some of those with some other whole foods and see what happens. And so many of my clients are like, I can't believe my face, my hands in just a few weeks of pulling back on some of those inflammatory. And during perimenopause, menopause, those things are heightened. And so you might not have had these issues before.
Right.
But with this flux of hormones, any small thing becomes a big thing.
Yes.
And so for me as a coach, just kind of giving them that advice and helping them. And it's one of those things. I had a client the other day, she's like, I just love cheese on my salad. I'm like, that's fine. let's do this. Do half as much cheese this week. And then the next week, I'm like, okay, now see if you can do half of that. And so again, helping people to realize that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. We can make progress little by little. And that actually is something that lasts longer.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, our daughter, she doesn't have any known food allergies or intolerances or anything, but I guess sometime last year she just decided she wanted to give up grains and gluten.
Mm-hmm.
And, she's in college, so she's having to eat cafeteria food.
Yeah.
But she feels so much better. And she's young and healthy and all of her hormones work and, but she feels terrible if she, cheats and eats a donut or a muffin or whatever, And so, I think it's as much just maybe the glyphosate chemicals that are sprayed on those grains and things as it is just the grain or the gluten.
It is. And that's one thing that people are like, why? And I'm like, it really is the quality of our gluten and dairy. And, I had a client who went to Europe and she was like, I feel great eating everything over here. And I'm like, yes.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It really is a thing. And that is sad to me. But I actually had a client and she had given up all gluten and dairy, but she was holding on to her whey protein powder. And I finally convinced her, I was like, let's just try and switch to a beef-based protein powder. And a month later, she's like, I don't feel like anything's changed. And literally 2 weeks later, she messaged me and she's like, I've dropped 10 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And nothing else. She had not changed anything else in her diet and her exercise, nothing. And it took about 4 weeks for it to get out of her system. And she lost 10 pounds. And that wasn't fat. That was all inflammation in her body, just from that one whey protein powder. So, and everyone doesn't react that way, but you don't know until you start investigating and figuring those things out.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Well, let's transition into, I know you help some clients who have autoimmune. Can you talk about that and what your experience has been and maybe kind of how it's different than just helping kind of a typical client, obviously menopause that's got its own issues, but then if you've got
the autoimmune
on top of it, it can be really difficult.
It can. Probably about 12 or 13 years ago, my best friend was diagnosed with Hashimoto's.
Okay.
And her endocrinologist recommended that she go gluten-free. And so I started to walk through that journey with her. And of course, this was before I was doing anything health-wise myself. But just learning through her about the effects of gluten and how her numbers changed drastically, within a few months of eliminating the gluten, and the depression. I mean, she was just really struggling with depression as well. And when she was diagnosed with that Hashimoto's. And so walking along that journey with her, and then moving into my own health journey and beginning to coach, and she's one of my clients. I would say probably a third of my clients have Hashimoto's or some kind of thyroid condition. It has become very common, especially in perimenopause, because so many of us have just struggled in previous years with chronic issues, whether it's some people, of course, there's a genetic link, but then a lot of times it is just from diet, chemicals, all kinds of things, that ends up this path. And so a couple of the things that I do differently when someone comes to me when they have Hashimoto's or a thyroid issue or anything, or an autoimmune, although those two are the main things. Number one, I encourage all of my clients to do kind of a 12-12 fasting, which just means 12 hours of eating, 12 hours of digestive rest. Okay. Nothing extreme. It allows the body to have a break and to rest. But for my autoimmune girls, you should not be fasting any more than that on a regular basis. Now, there are some exceptions. There are some times when that is useful, but in general, that is an additional stressor on the body.
Right.
And so helping them to get that breakfast in. And, so many of them are on a thyroid medicine, so they have to wait a certain amount of time before they can eat. So helping them plan that, helping them plan their workouts to where they are able to be fueled for their workouts. But starting their day off with protein, starting their day off with a good meal that's going to fuel them and going to help stabilize, because you want to keep your body in this in a state that is going to take care of itself as much as possible. And when you add additional stressors on, that's when you get flares. And so really trying to make sure that they eat, and they eat enough, that they do not go too long without a meal. Not necessarily saying we have to snack so many times, because it is good to have that digestive rest between meals, but for them to make sure they are aware that they are really fueling at the meal, and not being too skimpy. Because when you do that, again, that causes a stress on the body. And you can still lose weight in this way. It's a matter of structuring your food well, in order to fuel the body, but yet also doing it in a way that also will allow the body to lose weight. But we are also very careful with when someone is having a flare. And it's funny because I've started to learn, I know the signs, and I'll have a client start saying, oh, I'm just really struggling, and this and this and this. And I'll say, I wonder if you're having a flare. Like, oh, I bet you're right. But they're just not, as an outsider, it's easier for me to see. I'm seeing signs that your body is stressed out and that you are, having a Hashimoto's flare, and we need to back off of the exercise for a little while. Strength training is absolutely wonderful, but if it's a stressful situation, I usually have my clients back off to 1 or 2 workouts a week during the time that they're really feeling the fatigue, feeling the joint pain. A lot of my Hashimoto's, they feel joint pain in a flare, feeling fatigue, and we focus on fuel. And that is when we really focus on making sure we're getting the body fueled. We're making sure we're getting hydrated. We up our hydration, and we do walking and we do gentle exercise for a little while. And then they have learned to say, okay, guess what? I'm feeling pretty good this week. I feel like I'm coming out of it. And then I'm like, okay, let's give it 1 more week. We don't want to throw things back in a tizzy. But then working back into, okay, let's get back into our normal. Let's see if we can get back to that. The other thing that I have found is that generally my autoimmune girls have more food sensitivities. And the omega-3s and omega-6s, especially for, I have someone who has rheumatoid arthritis, and making sure that we keep those in balance. So watching, you can't eat too much pork. So watching the pork intake, upping the olive oil intake, balancing out the omega-3s and omega-6s. Again, has dairy crept in? Maybe you want to pull back on your dairy, being careful with that. Look at your diet, aware of some things. Because a lot of my ladies, they will have the special treats, they'll have the things at celebration, and those are good. But if they're not careful, then those start creeping in as a lot of normal things. And that's when we see that we start to get those inflammatory effects. So for me, helping them, hey, you need a brownie recipe? Here's a gluten-free, dairy-free brownie recipe. So being able to provide some alternatives, especially for them, so that they can still enjoy the fun things, but not have to, to physically suffer the consequences, and yet also to be able to participate. So exercise, backing down on that, making sure we're fueling, making sure we're getting rest, making sure we're hydrating, and really looking at their food logs carefully and saying, okay, I want you to shift to this earlier. The placement of carbs. Carbs are necessary for thyroid. whether your thyroid struggles, whether it's even if it's not producing, you really need carbohydrates for good thyroid health. And so making sure we're like looking at their food logs and saying, okay, I want you to move some carbs to your first meal. Let's get some good carbs. Okay. Let's not try the oatmeal. Let's try this carb instead and see if that. So, even though I coach as a group in general, I do a lot of one-on-one individualization because, like I said, each person is different. And especially for my autoimmune girls, just saying, okay, let's switch some things around and try this. And because we're taking a food log, because we're tracking our food, it makes it really easy for them to go, I felt really good today. Okay, let's look. What did you eat today? What order did you eat this in today?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we can replicate this tomorrow. Maybe we've hit on a good combination or a good order here and see if this would be a good fit, a good change.
Yeah. Well, I can relate to a lot of that. And, I mean, my mom had rheumatoid arthritis, so there were a lot of foods that were very inflammatory. I mean, just for an example, I remember she loved tomatoes, and like in the summertime, you slice up a tomato, put the mayonnaise and the salt and pepper. But then her feet would be like, all inflamed the next day, like the bottoms of her feet would just, I don't know, it was just kind of a weird reaction, but it was just like, you could see that direct correlation. So, yeah.
Absolutely. My best friend has had that same thing. She grew tomatoes one year, so she was eating lots of tomatoes, fresh tomatoes. And within a couple of weeks, she was like, my joints are hurting.
Yeah.
So
I know. A lot of those nightshades, they cause trouble.
They do. And, I believe in good, the Lord created these wonderful foods for us to have.
Yeah.
But, that doggone fall has caused some of us to not be able to tolerate some of those good things. But finding those things out, I think, is an important thing.
It is. Well, and, as health improves, sometimes we can add some of that back in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do you focus also on encouraging your clients to get like healthy fats? I mean, you mentioned the omega-3, but like in our household, we're big proponents of, grass-fed butter and ghee and tallow, all of that.
Yes, absolutely. We talk about, one of the things to talk about, number one, good oils and bad oils. And that's one of the things that when you eat out, you're going to get bad oils. And so we can't control that a whole lot, although thankfully there's more and more restaurants that are starting to make some of those changes. We have a wonderful one in our little town that has no seed oils and they do local produce. But that means you need to control what you fix in your house as much as possible because we can't control necessarily what we're eating outside. So looking at single origin oils, which now even, Walmart has organic single origin olive oils that you can find. So they're becoming much, more widely acceptable. What is a seed oil? Why do we want to avoid that? Because for me, a lot of this is about a why. I need to know a why, and then I'll be much more likely to actually follow through with it. So even looking at the way foods are cooked, you can take a food and fry it in seed oil, and it actually becomes trans fat, which are supposedly, not allowed, but it's a chemical reaction. And so again, all these things, we can't just go into a bubble. But we can control what's in our home. So looking at good oils, make sure that that's what you're using. Looking at what shows up as fat naturally, nuts. Having good nuts in your life, avocados, grass-fed meat. In fact, and this is another thing, actually talking about meat and things like that. I have a lot of my ladies who are single income, they're staying home with kids and money is an issue. And so for them, okay, you can't afford the top of the line organic chicken. So what's a good alternative? And even someone will find a good, like Aldi. Aldi has grass-fed beef. Okay,
They
Aldi
do.
has grass-fed beef on sale. Everybody run to Aldi and get that.
Yeah.
So balancing that out,
Yeah.
we know what is the best. Sometimes our budget and our situation may not allow us to have the best. So what is a good or a better solution? I'm thankful that grass-fed beef is becoming more available and the price seems to be getting a lot better. That is good. Even, good pasture raised eggs, the price of those have come down a lot. So yes, focusing on here's the whole food fats. Now afford the best quality that you can and think about, maybe this week I buy the grass fed beef. Next week, I'm going to have to buy the regular. Okay. The next week, I'm going to put in the budget to afford the grass fed beef. So having that balance, and understanding, even like you talked about fats, when you eat beef, the fat particularly is what is consumed or absorbed. So that is one of the things that, again, explaining why we want to eat those better quality foods, because you're eating what the animal is eating. I'm very blessed that we have land and we have a steer right now that we're going to butcher hopefully at the end of the summer. And I get to control what he eats,
Yeah.
that's just great. But
That's
most
awesome.
people don't get that opportunity.
No. Yeah.
Which just goes then to saying, control what you can control. Purchase what you can afford to purchase, but be thoughtful as to, okay, can I save up a little bit here and there to be able to purchase a little bit better next week? And again, to where that's not the all or nothing, but that there is some particles that we can do. And in fats, especially, I think it is important to think about those good quality whole food fats versus the lower quality and processed ones.
I agree totally. And also, if you think about it, like as far as like you were talking about the progression, in just making the choices, but the longer you go on that path of choosing the better foods, honestly, you probably are going to end up eating less because you're going to find yourself satiated and satisfied.
Absolutely.
I mean, you could eat like 3 giant bowls of pasta that's just going to go right through you, or you could eat a steak and maybe even half a steak and feel the same satiation.
That's the beauty of whole food, is that not only is it more filling, but it also has the ability to actually, we burn calories when we eat whole foods. So, and protein is the highest, actually. So when I explain it this way, if you think about having a piece of bread and having an apple, and you pour water on that piece of bread, it's going to just dissolve. That's what happens when you eat that bread. When you eat that bread, your body does not have to do anything to it. It just absorbs, it breaks down and goes into your bloodstream. If you think about pouring water on an apple, it is not going to do anything to that apple.
That's
you would have to pour lots and lots and lots and lots of water on it, right? Or soak it. And it's the same for our bodies. When you eat that apple, your body actually has to work. Your body burns calories breaking down that apple, not to mention the fiber, which then clogs things up and slows things down, which allows your body to slowly absorb the nutrients versus being thrown all of it at one time. But the thermodynamic effect of food is so interesting, and that is why we stay fuller longer. That is why we feel better eating that, because our body is actually working. If you think about when someone sits around for too long, their digestion doesn't work well. Their body doesn't work well. When you eat whole foods, you're actually helping your body to continue to function. And it not only does it continue to function, but it's actually burning calories while you're eating it, which is the reason why a lot of my ladies are eating more than they are used to and losing weight, because the food that itself is actually one of the best weight loss benefits, because it's having to work and it's making their bodies actually work for it. So.
Awesome. So I would want to ask, like, maybe how do you see faith as far as all of this and just implementing the diet and just can you kind of talk about that?
Yes. One of the things that I have realized is that there is no separation between life and spiritual, right? And when you start talking about, I mean, anything, you see the spiritual connections. You go into gardening, and I remember the first year I gardened, and I saw a couple of weeds out there. I'm like, oh, I'll get those tomorrow. Well, the next day there was like 14 million of them,
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, this is why God uses gardening analogies. Weeds are like sin. If you don't pluck them out right away, they multiply. And your health journey is the same exact way. And one of the things that has really struck me. So my pastor talks about the banks of the river, and there's the bank of law, and then there's the bank of grace. And so often we get stuck on one bank. And then when we go to the law, and then of course we can't keep it, we end up swinging all the way over to the other bank of grace, and everything's okay. I'm forgiven. Well, really, we need to be in the middle, right? Because really being in the middle of the river is the only way you make progress, the only way you move forward, as a believer. And it's the same way in our health journey. So many women, I would say the number one thing that keeps women from working on their health, from losing weight, from maintaining a healthy lifestyle is an all or nothing mindset. And that is the same thing. That is the banks of the river. And so someone will say, I'm going to change my health. I'm going to do everything right. And they jump on that perfection bank. And when 2 weeks later, they're like, oh, I'm miserable, they go all the way over to the grace bank. And they say, it doesn't matter what I eat. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to enjoy life. And neither of those are correct. And when we do things in moderation, when we look at this as, I can't be perfect spiritually or health-wise, and yet I also don't need to just do whatever. Our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we are to take care of them and steward this body well. We are to prepare our bodies. There's a human responsibility that if the Lord is going to use my body, I want it to be ready for him to use it. And and obviously, regardless, I'm not restricting the Lord. If I don't take care of my body, I'm not saying God can't use me, because I'm not going to put him in that box. But as a believer, I should want to have my body ready for whatever God calls me to. I should want to be able to be in a position where if the Lord says, hey, I need you to go on this mission trip, I am fit for that call to be able to go. And even as a representative of Christ, walking around day to day, I want to be able to have a life and to be able to live in a way that I am able to share my faith. I am able to be a representative of the Lord. And so that means I need to take care of my body. And also, I think that there's an element of when we struggle with illness, when we struggle with, autoimmune diseases, or we struggle with cancer, whether we struggle with whatever comes along, recognizing that none of this is a surprise to God, that he has put this in our life for a reason. Maybe it is for us to be able to witness to someone else who has the same struggle. Maybe it is for us to be able to help and give guidance to someone. Maybe it's for the non-believer watching us go through this, seeing how we are handling it. And so all of that goes back to how I treat my body, how I treat what I put into my body, how I work my body. Everything should be to the glory of God. And that includes, that includes all things. My church is going through Ecclesiastes right now. And so eat, drink, and be merry to the glory of God. And, there's that idea of the Lord has made this food for us, and he has given people creativity to make creations. And of food, and I want to enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I also know that I want to enjoy it in a way that glorifies him and doesn't glorify myself.
Yeah.
So that really is when you start loving your body healthy
Mm-hmm.
instead of hating your body skinny, it becomes a flip for people. And I say, you want to change your body. If you aren't willing to love your body and love yourself and love how God has created you, then you're always going to be fighting it.
Yeah.
And it's never going to happen. You're never going to be successful. You're never going to make that switch if you are just trying to do something to your body instead of trying to do something for your body. So it is really, truly a spiritual mindset of, I want to love my body well. And that means this, this, and this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, like you were saying, you know, you do what you can do, and you know, you want to increase, you know, as far as just better foods and better habits and all that. But you know, at the end of the day, you don't beat yourself up with guilt. You just have to, you know, leave that with the Lord and say,
That's
okay,
right.
God, tomorrow's a new day, or just
That's right.
help me on this journey and help me keep going, you know?
That's right. There should never be, you know, the Lord uses, I think the Lord uses guilt in our lives for change, but it's never a shame.
Right.
And that's the
Exactly.
thing. It's something that should drive us to him,
Yes.
not away from him. And it's the same
Yes.
thing. If I eat 3 cookies, it can either drive me back to the cookie jar in shame,
Yeah.
or I can say, those cookies were good. You know, I probably don't want to eat anymore. I think I'm good. And I go on with my day.
That's right.
So it is, I think about Judas and Peter, you know, both of them went against the Lord. And Judas, his guilt drove him to shame and to take his own life. And Peter's guilt drove him to repentance. And we should be the same way with ourselves, and same way with food, and same way with our lifestyle. There can be times when I'm like, oh man, eating half of that cake probably wasn't a good idea. But you know what? I ate it, I track it, and I move on. And I'm like, I'm probably not going to eat half that cake tomorrow. Next time I have the opportunity, I'm going to eat a slice. But if I feel shame about it, then I'm just going to go back to that cake and keep eating and keep picking.
That's right.
And I keep feeling worse and worse about myself.
That's right.
So it should all drive us one way or the other.
Very good. All right. Well, let's see. So Stephanie, you send out some emails. Is it once a week?
Yes.
Yeah. And I've really enjoyed reading those. There's just such good content, funny stories and recipes, and just all kinds of good things. But in January, you sent one out, and it was more about the new year. But there was a quote in it I really, really liked, and I was wondering if you could share that. And also, I will say, we're going to put some of Stephanie's information in the show notes if you'd like to work with her and be a client. But anyway, thank you so much for being on today. And it's just been super fun getting to talk with you and getting to know you better. But if you wouldn't mind reading that quote as we close.
I have enjoyed every bit of it. It's always fun to talk to someone who has similar views and opinions.
Yes.
But one of the things I do focus on, like we kind of said, is looking forward. And so tomorrow does not require a brand new you. It just asks you to keep becoming the woman you're called to be. The habits you're building, the identity you're stepping into, the faith you're living out, they all matter, because you're not behind. You're not starting over. You're just still becoming. And that's the important thing to focus on.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great.